Welcome to Open Source Friday. Today, I'm thrilled because we actually have someone that I met last year at our GitHub Universe conference from the Nix Foundation. For all of you NixOS users, welcome, Ron Efroni. Hi.
And nice to meet you again, and super excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. It's coming. And last time we had a amazing conversation about your company, which, hey, I love the swag. Next time I see you, I need some swag for myself too, please. Thank you.
It's purple. We're diversifying the brand, but I'm sticking to the purple for emotional reasons.
I love it. So we talked about your company, of which you are a co-founder, Flox, which is built on top of Nix. And I will share the link to that conversation here for you folks. But also, spoiler alert, you're going to be coming on to GitHub for Startups, started at Wednesday streams. So we'll actually get to see a demo and we'll get to say some of the cool things that you built with Nix. So definitely look forward to that. I'll be sure to add the note to when and where you can tune in for that. That's going to be a live episode. When we talked last time, you mentioned a bit about your work with the NixOS Foundation. Before we get into the details of your contributions to that, for the folks who are joining, our audience is super diverse and it's from all programming languages, all fields of interest in tech, and all fields of interest in NixOS. Can you tell us a bit about what in the world?
Definitely. So Nix is a lot of things, but from the ground up, Nix is one of the largest open source package repositories. Universal, totally supported by the Nix community and all the contributors there. So we today have over 120,000 packages. On top of that sits the Nix language, and then on top of that sits NixOS. For me, Nix is the first instance in the world where you actually have fully reproducible, deterministic environments that you can use across the stack. And you can imagine it as like the package manager we always wanted, with all the bells and whistles, with all the universalness to it in one place. So that's maybe Nix in 30 seconds.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Obviously, you have an organization on GitHub. I'll go ahead and share that. And that's the NixOS organization. And then you do have a foundation. I think this project has like super solid governance, which is great. It's super important, open source. Tell us about your role within the foundation itself. I'd love to understand a little bit better about what you do for them.
So about 3 years ago, we re-upped the initial foundation. The whole goal of the foundation was to start more actively seeing how we can support the project, how we can keep the lights on while also helping the lights shine brighter for those to come. And that's what we've been running for about a few years until the beginning of this year, where we are now transforming and graduating from that initial foundation that we formed to one that is very empowering, something that like we're moving to much more community-led governance. And today we're actually in the midst of building up the next form of governance for Nix with the assembly, with the community, with the board all together. So my role is 50 different hats, but it's a lot about both the financials and working with partners and bringing awesome collaborations with the GitHub open source community team and with the AWS teams, while also working internally in the community to make sure that projects get funded and all these core things are being brought together. We've also seen that evolution, and I really appreciate just how open source communities and open source leadership are all one big tribe. So a lot of folks have given me from their time and like other projects to show us the ropes, what they've done right and wrong. And I think eventually you see that it's a very organic curve where a project slowly like forms and we hack on it, and then you need governance, and then there's like an initial appointed governance, but then at some level you graduate into community-based governance. And that's exactly what Nix is transforming to right now. And I'm super excited about it because yesterday, I think we just launched the initial draft of the values, which is wild. But yeah, the assembly has been working on it for a long time now.
Once they're polished, we'll share on the note. And you have a super active community. Let's share the orgs page. I think it's a Discord. There's plenty of opportunities for people to interact with the core team.
There's a lot going on. Nix is, again, it's so wide. There's so many use cases for it. There's so many different teams utilizing, from big companies like Google just announcing that IDX is based on Nix, all the way to I want to run my Minecraft server in the basement that I don't have on NixOS. I actually just heard something super cool. I won't say who, but someone just told me that the largest train model in the world is now running on NixOS. And there's just so much happening. So there's the infra team and the marketing team. I think one of the most important messages I want to relay, especially when it comes to open source, is you don't have to be an engineer in order to be part of our community and part of our project, right? If you have a knack for design or organization or putting a meetup together, it's like that is insanely valuable and part of being successful as a community here.
I love that. I think that's part of the ethos that it's so clearly stipulated on your page. Like, it's something like diverse and welcoming community. Like, it's right there. I appreciate that foundation has made that such a central focus. And that speaks of how cool the community is. I love hearing about the cool things that people are doing with open source. We have to find where this train is. We have to share that with folks. If it's shareable, right? If it's shareable, that's super cool.
I'll work on it. Let's see if I can get something by the time we next talk. It's a really cool company, but I want to make sure that they're totally cool
okay with it. Yeah.
Being like, that's really awesome.
Yeah, it is really cool. So there's a couple of official spaces for Nix. We have the GitHub organization, which I shared earlier, and then there is us, right? And I think there's one more. You do have social media instances where people can follow.
Right. We use Matrix for like our IRC kind of communication messaging platform, and shout out to that team because another open source amazing project. We use Zulit. So also shout out to the Zulit open source project, which I think is amazing. We use that as like an internal platform to communicate, collaborate, discuss heavier and more critical conversations in a more asynchronous friendly way. So it's like you don't get lost after 1,000 messages. It has a lot of tools and features that help you actually collaborate.
Oh, wow. That is fantastic. I love that. I'm not familiar with that, but I will definitely look into it.
Right.
That can save you from the back scroll of Slack and other places. I'm down for, especially when you're having those conversations that are like so important. So this is really cool. When we met last year, we talked a little bit about the future of not only the foundation, but of course, Nix and all the components. But is there anything else in your horizon as a foundation that you'd like to share with the folks who are tuning in?
Yeah, I think there's a lot happening. Nix has grown so much, has reached so much adoption that it's going through the organic, like successful open source project phases. And the next one that we're facing and we've been facing for the last few months and working on is there's starting to be like success canes happening. Our buckets and our storage and our transfers and where we have our build farms are exploding.
Wow.
And also in terms of the cost, right? So now we're thinking, like, I'm also being a lot more thoughtful with a lot of teams about how do we create a sustainable Nix, right? Moving from let's grow Nix and let's tell everyone about it. How do we think about the next 5 years and 10 years? And how do we hand off a project that is sustainable to the next generation that will come in and operate it? So there's a lot of that happening, right? And it starts with the values, that's the baseline. And it goes into things like, what is our community's relationship with different projects that are based on Nix, but can also maybe fund and help fund Nix long-term?
Absolutely. And that is a super important segue, actually, because I do want to talk, obviously, we've seen the flag when we're talking about sustainability, very important topic. And it takes companies using the product and wanting to give back and companies being successful, building on top of the best possible technology available, which happens to be open source because open source is awesome. And one of them is you, it's your company. So I'd love if you just talk a little bit about what it is that you do in a nutshell. If you could explain to us what it is that Flox does, like why were you founded specifically? I know you're the co-founder, right? So yeah, love to hear a little bit about that.
I'll give the short version because I do know that we're going to dig a bit deeper on another session. The history was that I used to lead developer products for Facebook, and I was working all around developer productivity, developer tooling, things like that. There was a day that I was building a project that really made me interface with how complex it got to get started and maintain a project without even looking at the writing the code itself. As an engineer, writing the code is the whole magical part.
Right.
And coincidentally, I was connected with my now co-founder and CTO, Michael, who was going through a similar motion. And in 2017, 2018, was the head of build and release for a huge firm out of New York. He ended up landing on Nix. So he tried to bring Nix into that firm. And that was the first attempt to bring Nix to enterprise. That didn't go successfully. So he actually built a team and then a layer that became Flox to make it accessible to folks at work and to folks that don't necessarily know all of Nix, like the language and how to write expressions and all of that. That was our early inspiration to, this is a really powerful community and technology. How do we make it more accessible to a wider set of folks? And that's what we went out to do very early on.
For folks who are already using Nix, right? They're already familiar. Like, is it a big learning curve for adopting Flox?
No, so Flox is actually targeting folks that don't necessarily know Nix. We're coming and saying, we want you to start using Nix and you don't have to actually learn too much about it. We have a flow that's super intuitive, integrated into the things you know how to use today. And the secret sauce is that we have Nix escape hatches inside of Flox. So I actually want you to keep graduating and for some folks to end up becoming Nix contributors and going deeper in the Nix ecosystem. It's like my two hats sit together as we were building out this vision and product for the company.
I love that. And this is such an interesting opportunity for me here as the host of Open Source Friday, because not many times I get to actually speak to a company that has a key person in the company, like you, the co-founder, who actually has such big responsibility with the foundation of the language. Super unique. Speaking of that responsibility, I have to ask, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'd love to understand the relationship between Flox, the company, and Nix. Where do the two worlds meet? Like, how are you? I know you have obviously a lot of awareness on the need for sustainability, a lot of love for the community. If you can put your CEO hat for a moment, then maybe I'd love to just understand, what are you thinking? I think that this will be super useful for other people who are working, and maybe I'll build on top of an open source project about how they can actually continue, get back, and or what does that even look like, that relationship.
Flox is built on top of Nix. And for us, that means that everything that goes into making Nix, we wouldn't exist without it. So that's core inside of the company. Everything from who we hire and how we hire to how we build and how we operate in the open space and what we invest our time into is based on that. Nix is the core. Nix packages, the community is the core. And for us, that's like a first principle of what we can do to make Nix successful. That comes first. And I think for me, that means that Flox, again, is built on top. So Nix needs to be successful and we're incentivized to make Nix successful. And then on top of it, we're building things that are beyond what, like putting my foundation hat, Nix needs to be handling or needs to be looking at. And those are things inside of the enterprise domain. And what do big companies need? And what are the folks that only work from 9 to 5 and need to ship a feature out required, but not necessarily, let's say, for running Nix on a satellite or running some super cool edge open source project. And that's where Flox comes in. So for us, it's like a core ideology that we never compete with Nix. And everything we do has to end up benefiting Nix itself. So it's like funny when I say we've built escape hatches in our own product, which is super weird because usually you'd be like, no, I want you to stay here and I want you to keep using and leveraging this ecosystem that we've built. And here we're saying, no, actually, if I was able to introduce you to this amazing concept and shift in software, I want you to go deeper and I want to help you go deeper. And this is versus instances where I see, and you said that this might be helpful to folks looking at this and thinking about their own projects or thinking about building things versus finding things that might compete, right? If the community is working on something, if the community is doing something, how can we do better? How can we be stewards and supporters and empower the community versus how can we take that or replicate or compete with those efforts? Because then that's redundant and we're not water raising all ships kind of methodology.
I love to see companies build like this because at the end, I think it's for the betterment of open source, right? Like it actually, what you're doing actually pushes forward progress. And thank you for that and sharing that. That's awesome. So folks, take note. There is a way to do this if you're thinking about building a company and a way to do it responsibly and keeping in mind how it's all about the progress at the end of the day of the language itself and the manager, whatever the open source project is. So that's fantastic. Okay, so if I'm interested and I understand that I can join the Discourse, I can take a look at the GitHub repos, which we shared earlier, then looking through the resources, looks like there is some online tutorials, there is some weekly and things that are community maintained, like for contribution, try to lower the barrier to entry, like as much as possible. It seems very accessible and it seems like a good place for someone that maybe is being hesitant to contribute to open source to get their feet wet. So any advice for people who are thinking maybe they do want to contribute? This is something that is interesting to them.
Yeah, definitely. So Nix.dev is an amazing resource. It was built and initially incepted by Domin in the side of the community. And then it was taken on by a lot of contributors in the documentation team, and huge commendment for that effort there. So Nix.dev is a great starting resource. NixOS.org really has everything you need coming out of it. Like, you can find all the different places. But at the end of the day, I think where the community kind of lives and breathes is the Nix discourse and the Matrix channel. So if you need help, if you need anything, that's the place to go. And honestly, I'm around. Ping me on any one of these channels and I'll respond, and I'll try and be helpful or find someone that can. Contributing is not just for engineers. It's not just to write code. If you want to do something, get in, and there's ways to do it, right? If you're designing the latest logo for a release, or helping out with NixCon or something that's meaningful. And I think that's part of the magic of open source.
I love that. That's the power of community right there. NixConf, let's talk about that. Next year, you're doing something in North America, and earlier next year, right?
Yeah, yes, there's
conferences, but we have to talk about it.
Yeah. So there's two conferences. There's the European one and the US side one.
Right.
European one is in October, and the US one is going to be in March. And the US one is partnered with Scale. So we co-locate with Scale, which is the Southern Linux Expo. Might have said that. And it's like a 20-something year thing that's run by an amazing team led by an amazing individual called Elon. And this year in 2024 was the first year we did it, which was insane. And it will happen again next year. So we'll hope to have announcements and CFPs and call for sponsors in the coming 2 months.
That is wonderful. I love that. So keep your eyes peeled for the next conference, and then you'll be there. And I'm guessing the Nix community obviously is going to show up and be a part of NixCon. Love to have you again. I hope we get a chance to see you in person. I know you came to Universe and we talked a lot about your company, and we're going to talk a lot about your company on our next stream in Startup Wednesdays. Shout out to Startup Wednesdays for an open source human, someone that's serving in a foundation, someone that is maybe deep in mentorship or contributions, or thinking about building, I don't know. I have to ask, especially right now, folk tickets on sale.
Yeah, hands down. So I think I'm personally super excited about getting here. We're so excited that I'm finishing a conference on Sunday in Berlin and landing here to make it on time for the Tuesday opening. Actions speak louder than words. We attended last year, and that was the crowd we were looking for, both for like-minded folks on the open source project side, just talking and hacking and getting ideas. And I know that GitHub, because we're part of a bunch of programs like the startup team and the open source community team, that enables us to meet so many people that are helpful for years to come. At the end of the day, the content is super on point for the topics that we care about, right? So it's open source and software development and infrastructure and communities. And obviously the hot topic of the year is going to be AI. I think my excitement about it is that this is going to be the one conference where AI is taken to the things that are relevant to me in that domain. And I guess the last thing I'll say is I've been following GitHub this week, and if
nothing's happened. We're recording this the week of August 1st. And so nothing's happened. Lots of excitement going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that were just launched this week, and I'm just excited to what will happen as we start trending towards GitHub Universe with the GitHub models and the latest features and functionality there.
Yes, I love as a company the commitment to continue giving access to open source models. We think GitHub Copilot to me is fantastic. I feel every time there is the maintainer community means so much to GitHub, and I know personally those are the folks that when something like this is cooking, that's who we want to talk to. See how it can be impactful within your project and how we can support it. So all that innovation and all that AI, we're moving into some exciting times for open source, I hope. So thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your experience at Universe. I want to talk to maintainers. Please, if you're a maintainer and you're coming to GitHub Universe, come talk to me. I promise it'll be super chill. I will try and have some cool swag for you. Maybe some coffee. It would be a cool opportunity to just come by and talk about your project. It doesn't have to be a project with 10,000 stars, 1,000,000 stars. I just want to get to know you, listen from you, hear what you're building, and more importantly, see what's happening, who you met. You get to network with open source maintainers. It's the private conference that we host for them is most therapeutic, because you get to talk to other people who are believing open source every day and care so deeply, and you're with your people. If you're an open source maintainer and you're coming to GitHub Universe, or if you want to configure. Talk to me. Thank you so much for being here today. Anything else coming up from the Nix world? I know we'll keep our eyes peeled for the conference coming up. Anything else coming up for Nix that you want to share?
The two small shout outs that I make is there's a lot of call to actions. So if you're using Nix, care about Nix, reach out, talk to us. We'd love to chat and find ways to collaborate. There's even like a Nix in the Wild series that we do with companies or individuals using Nix where just shout a spotlight and we're like, hey, look at this. It's really cool. Potentially the train one might be coming up. And yeah, we're now also on the Flox side, we're helping a bunch of like open source repositories with getting started with some Nix related things, but we can probably talk about that we dive deeper on the next session.
Yes, we're going to talk about that on Startup Wednesday. Folks, I know what it is and it's fantastic. And if you are running any kind of open source project, you're going to just didn't Floxify, correct me if I'm saying exactly. Like it's a way to make the barrier to entry for folks to contribute to your projects even lower. It's amazing what you're doing, and we'll definitely be talking about that next time. But for now, folks, go to nix.dev, go check out Flox to see what cool things can be, like the things that you built on top of Nix. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for being here, Ron. I appreciate you. Listen, go buy those universe tickets. Ron will be there. Cool people, come meet your fellow open source. If you are a maintainer, contributor, or you are building something on top of open source, I want to talk to you. Thanks again for joining Open Source Friday, and thanks for your support of open source.
I've always, watched it virtually, but never got the chance to, come in person. And I actually took the chance and, applied to speak here. And I was invited to be part of the panel discussion today. So it was really amazing to, actually come here to experience all of this.
I think GitHub Universe does have this very casual feel to it, and presenting on the main stage, there's definitely this I'm just talking to developers about this cool thing that I get to work on every day. It's a very different conference feeling than a lot of other places I've presented.
It's a super welcoming conference and really has a community feel to it, which is amazing.
I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to actually speak here at GitHub Universe. So having went through the keynotes, it was an exciting keynote. And I also delivered my session, so I'm looking forward to exploring what the new sessions are going to deliver and what things I can learn.
As a speakers, we are really impressed by the coaching, the content. The whole organization.
I've spoken at many conferences at this point, and most of them are more corporate-driven and quite a bit larger and quite a bit just louder, frankly. But here, I've made friends with many people. Everyone feels approachable, and I feel approachable too, and I've really enjoyed that experience so far.